Hello there, welcome to this analysis video of Game 2 from the World Championship match, Magnus Carlsen against Ian Nepomniachtchi. First of all, my apologies for not being able to make the video after the game. I had extra work. Unfortunately, this channel isn't bringing in the dough, so have to take the jobs when I can get them. But we're getting there, hopefully, slowly but surely. Very slowly but surely. And well, we are closing in on 10,000. Maybe if you're watching it, we're already there. But if you're watching, click sub, and you might be number 10,000. Have you ever been number 10,000 or something? That would be pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for the support. I do appreciate it. Let's get into it. Magnus with the white pieces, and well, we had some speculation. My guess was d4. Stefan Gismar agreed with me. He said 1d4, and that's what Magnus played. I think one reason to play d4 is to see what Nepomniachtchi has in mind against d4. Will he stick to his Grunfeld by playing g6, or try to play what he's been playing recently? And the answer was, this time around, he's not going to play the Grunfeld, he played e6. Will we see the Grunfeld later in the match? Only time will tell. But it's always interesting to see these, match situations, the match strategy, and the kind of poker, players have to play in these matches. Maybe you don't want to show your hand too early. You want to maybe wait with your main trump till later. So, there are a lot of considerations, and many of them will come to light later in the match for sure. Okay, Carlsen went knight f3, d5, and he has had this Queen's Gambit declined with both colors, of course, but he's had the Queen's Gambit in his World Championship matches. But he hasn't that often played the Catalan with g3, and he does this time around. Now, Nepo goes for the main line, bishop e7. Many ways to play. You can take on c4 immediately. You can play bishop to b4 check. But Nepo goes for bishop e7, the main line. And they follow the most principled moves here, the most played moves by both sides, d takes e4 and queen c2. Now, the main line here is a6. I've had this position many times myself. I like the Catalan with white, so I will give you some thoughts here on the move, the positions, and things to play against it and maybe around it. So a6 is the main move when queen takes c4 and b5 follows. Also recently, and I've been looking more into this, white has been playing a lot of a4, and this line I quite like. But if you like this line with queen takes c4 and b5, this is the main line. If you like this, you might want to think about, in this position, instead of going queen c2, to go queen a4. And the idea with queen a4 is you simply stop the move b5. You can no longer go b5, you take the pawn. And then black doesn't really have any way to punish this. He can play a6 or c6, but he could have played both those moves after queen c2. And then we take the pawn and we transpose. So queen a4, a6, this is the same position we just looked at, the main line. So queen a4, if you play the lines with queen takes c4, you can bypass a lot of stuff by playing queen a4. But Carlsen played queen c2, and Nepo played this top of a line with b5, which wasn't on the radar. I mean, some years ago, when Avruk had these famous Catalan books for white, Grandmaster repertoire, this line was kind of new, and I started to get a lot of people to play this against me online, and I played a4 here, and my first time playing against this, I played queen takes c4, which is a bad move, which shows black's idea. He plays bishop h6, and then he wants to play c5, and you see that, trying to get the knight out or something, you hang the e2 pawn, So black is ready to play c5, and this can get tricky. You have to play very energetically, some 95 or something to make it work. So the consensus, I think, has been to play knight after d2 here as the best line. And this is a pawn sacrifice, so we have to first take care of the rook, so c6. And white usually takes with a knight on c4. Again, to avoid this bishop a6 stuff. Hitting the queen, so knight takes e4. But this is a pawn sacrifice. But we get to chase the white queen around, and this is very theoretical. Grishuk has played this, and Nakamura has defended this with the black pieces, I think, relatively successfully, although he lost against Grishuk. After a4, b4, white can also play knight e5. And both here and in the position we'll see in the game, queen takes d4 is an idea for black. Black sacks the exchange, and then takes here. Again, if we take, then bishop a6, black gets it out of play. Interesting lines, and of course black is ready. Finally, it seems to be a new line to play bishop b7 here, which I wasn't fully aware of. Black is playing this, kind of as a gambit, but like a gambit to simplify. And I even saw a game Berkes against Grishuk at the European Club Cup. I remember a solid position. Maybe I think we have it here. It was b takes a6, knight takes a6, queen takes c4. I think bishop d5, queen d3, knight b4, takes. No, let's see, it was it this? Yeah, knight takes c2. No, I can't remember the line. Okay, anyway. The plan for black in these lines is to simply, he sacrifices a pawn, but he's trying to simplify the queen side. And, okay, it's a new line. So many things to consider here. But after queen c2, b5, Carlsen played knight e5 immediately. And this was a bit of a surprise. Again, we can take this pawn on d4, like in the line we just looked at. But Nepo seemed to be a little bit surprised here at least. And he played the move pawn to c6. Which of course can be taken. But very often in these lines, we're not in a huge rush to win back the pawn that we sacrificed. We're more interested in dynamic play with the pieces, maybe with the pawns, get the big pawn center, get the pieces out. And as we'll see later, many times black's pieces are somewhat, clustered and don't have a lot of good squares. So, like for example, taking here, many times black's queenside pieces are the problem in the Catalan. So once we take here, rook b8, followed by bishop b7 pretty soon. Black has no weaknesses. He even has some space to work around with. Black can be quite happy. So after c6, Carlsen preferred to play a4 here. And now we have this pressure on the long diagonal, so Nepo played knight d5 to block the diagonal. Carlsen got the pieces out, and now f6. And knight f3 back. And here we see a little bit of what I'm talking about with the pieces. We see the f6 pawn. It's in the way of the knight and the bishop. Same with the c6 pawn, it's in the way of the knight. This pawn is in the way of the bishop. So the pieces, they become a bit, it's clogged up. They don't have a lot of squares. So that's a lot of the compensation that white has here. Now, queen d7, and this turns out to be a novelty. Position hadn't been seen very many times. I think 2 games I found. Black played b4 here previously, but okay, queen d7. And Carlsen goes for an ambitious plan here. He plays e4, getting this central pawn duo, and then queen e2. This does allow the knight here, but Carlsen figures he can play around it and probably exchange it at some point. If you're feeling very bad about it, maybe you can play something like this and this at some stage to trade it. But e5 was played by Magnus, trying to create some squares in the center and opening up again for this bishop. Nepo went on with development here, bishop e7. And first when I saw this, I was thinking, what if you just place f5? And the idea is, you know, just put the bishop here, keep everything closed. And if white wants to play this, trade off the bishops, he doesn't have a good way to get this knight to d6. d6 is where we want this knight, but it's not easy to get it there. Having said that, you know, black is reasonably passive, but there does exist like a very good line, it seems to. So take, knight e1, and pressure on the diagonal, and we force the trade of this knight here. And we can even think about dynamic stuff like d5 here. So that's probably not a very good option for black. He went for bishop to b7. Carlsen now took an f6, again trying to create some squares on the e file for his knights. Weakness here on e6, a much more important weakness than the ones on the queen side. And knight e4. And the knights are eyeing these squares, e5 and c5. And we kind of tried to make this bishop stay bad. Nepo tries to get the pieces out, knight a6. And now the first moment where the kibitzers of the world went, no, oh no, he didn't. Because Carlsen didn't play a good move according to the computer. Now, these positions are really difficult because many times you don't want to win material, you want to keep the initiative. Because if you take the material, you lose the initiative, and you know, bad things happen. So it's really difficult to play for both sides. I can say this having played the similar type of positions myself. I even had a very interesting game where I sacked this pawn and went for the similar stuff against a very strong grandmaster. So these games become very complex and very rich. So mistakes are to be expected, even though these are the best players in the world. And here the computer says knight takes f6 was the best move. If rook takes, then knight e5, and if pawn takes, bishop h6. And white keeps some initiative and compensation for the pawn. Instead, knight e5 was played, and perhaps I don't think he missed, but perhaps Magnus underestimated the power of the move bishop takes e5 because it looks anti-positional. It looks more natural to take with a knight and then take with the bishop. Keep the bishop because you have a lot of weak dark squares, so you want to keep the bishop around. But then white can play knight e5, taking the bishop, something like rook d1, then take on b5, hit this pawn. Black is in trouble. But taking first with the bishop, like Nepo did, allows the other knight to come into the game, and it forces white to either trade or play knight d6. And because we don't want to trade out this knight, preferably, I think. So Carlsen preferred to keep it, but in doing so he has to sacrifice the exchange after knight b3, and that's what happened. Again, the computers say bishop e3 is a better way to give up the exchange, which Carlsen did not do. And we have some compensation here. f4, bishop e4, maybe poke at the king side with queen h5. Still, this is bad. And we keep the dark squared bishop, which could be very useful. But Carlsen played rook b1, so he kind of loses the tempo because he has to move his rook again. So bishop e3 maybe was a better choice again. But now we have a mass trade on c1. Black wins the exchange, and rook a to b8. So it seems like black wants to play c5. And of course white was threatening maybe to just take on b5. So rook a b8. And now we've protected the bishop on b7. So again, we were talking about taking material versus dynamics. If white tries to simplify, takes the material, he's down a pawn, and these pawns are very strong. Eventually they're going to be pushed, the heavy pieces behind. King relatively safe. Looks like a very tough ending for white. So Carlsen again tries to go for dynamics, rook d1. Now we see that the knight is threatening some discoveries. But Nepo doesn't mind, bishop a8. If you're going to take, c4 or b5. In both cases black figures, okay, the b8 rook will become more active. Bishop e4 by Carlsen. And now a move that was a little bit criticized by Nepomniachtchi. c3. But this move is in a way understandable. I saw some people suggest b takes a4. But the problem here can be that in many lines white just wants to take on h7, play queen h5 check, and then bring this rook. And we can't do a whole lot about this rook coming to this square. In fact, black probably has to give up the queen here. He gets b2, but we get c4. And probably we hold the balance here with white, with this stuff hanging and the bad bishop. But c3 is interesting because if we go for this now, which Carlsen did not do, then we can play c2. And the new queen that we make with check, by the way, can come back to h6. And black is winning. So Carlsen went for queen c2, and probably actually the truth lies somewhere in between. I think we can play queen e7, or I think g6 is given as the best move by the computer and it prefers black here. But okay, c3, Carlsen played queen c2. We can't allow this, so g6. Now Carlsen took with a pawn. Could have done so immediately, but I don't think there's a lot of difference. We have a trade on a4, rook fd8, and rook a1. Okay, eyeing this pawn, but then again we don't really want to trade. I think it's more of a case of getting the rook active. c5, queen c4. So the queen, keeps an eye on these pawns, and this rook keeps an eye on this pawn if anything moves from its defense. Trade on e4, knight takes. A big check looming here on f6, so the queen can't come to this square. The white queen keeps an eye on the e6 pawn. King gets out of the way, king h8. Knight goes back, closing the d file. Important with these heavy pieces. And also we must say this knight is tremendous, and I think it gives white full compensation, maybe even more, because now he wins the c5 pawn. Black tries to activate, but king c2. We're not going to allow this trade. We're going to take an a7 if we do it, because there's no more check. After a6, king h3, getting out of the c6 check, which you couldn't do before because of the hanging a7 pawn. Now Carlsen fortifies, brings the c pawn forward, pawn to c4, protected by the knight, queen g4, eyeing e6. And here Nepo decided to bail out. The pressure is such that white is even slightly better here. So Nepo decided to give the exchange here, give it back, and in fact give a pawn here. After c5 he took the pawn. White is off a pawn, but rook f8. Queen takes the checks, the f2 pawn is hanging. White tried to defend it, but then queen f5 check. And Nepo managed to simplify here. And with 3 against 2, white is not going to make any progress here. He went for h5. He's trying to create a passed half pawn. Nepo trying to get a trade, but not take immediately. He wants white to take, which white doesn't. Eventually we get a trade on h5, and we have to keep this pawn together, so g5. But now we see the checks. We attack the pawn, but now we just attack the weakness. We come back, and rook a4. White could have traded rook f6, I guess, in the final position, but at the end of the day, the h pawn is enough bait to hold the draw here. And for these guys, it's very easy, so they agreed to a draw here. So I think this was actually a pretty rich game, and we have to give Carlsen credit. He's been playing dynamically. First game, he sacks a pawn. Second game, he sacks the pawn and then the exchange. Small chances for both sides, but so far we haven't had any case where somebody is in real danger of losing. Perhaps Magnus, if he hadn't found some good moves in this middle game, but he managed to hold the balance. So it's 1-1 after 2, and I'm liking the start so far. We're going to see a lot more of this, openings, poker type situations, and I'm really looking forward to see what happens in the next few games, and hope to see you then. Thank you. Bye bye.